System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Left.
This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Thursday, May 15th. I am Amin TMK alongside Emoja, Lil Tanky Sumler. Emoja, hello, my friend. Happy Thursday.
It's good, sir.
Well, I'm doing just fine. I'd love to talk a little bit of geopolitics with you. You see the title. It looks as if Donnie J in Syria right now, talking with the guy, the man, you know him. He used to be, man, back in the day.
Chief?
That's behind him. He does.
Give him the chop.
He used to be. He goes by Ahmed El Shara now, all right? Don't call him Al Julani. That's dead naming him, okay?
Damning, that's what the liberals would say.
Yes, yeah. And you keep on to bring up head chopper in charge and all that other stuff. This man has been named president by himself, okay? And a man that works...
Validated by the West, man. Yeah, I mean, you know, they're all about democracy. I mean,
listen, exactly. How do you become president? Everyone knows you become president by naming yourself president. So that's what happened with Al Shara. Don't call him El Julani. And this is, we start a new thing here. I have a little video I just want to show you. A little meeting from...
Tough guy.
This is Donnie J. Let's give it a go here.
You know, strong pass. Very strong pass fighter.
Is that Bernie?
But he's got a real shot at pulling it together.
I think that's...
How did you find the Syrian president?
Right. I think very good. Young, attractive guy, tough guy. You know, strong pass. Very strong pass fighter.
Is that Bernie?
But he's got a real shot at pulling it together.
How did you find...
Yeah, so he's got a strong past.
I wonder what that means.
Yeah, it's a strong past, not a weak past. You can react to that if you want, but that's something that we've been trying. So yeah, strong past, young guy, fighter. Thoughts on, or what do we know sort of about this meeting? What was discussed?
And this goes to what we've been talking about for quite some time, right, as it relates to Syria. We knew for a long time that the Department of Defense had factions that they were hoping would win. That was the Kurds. Meanwhile, we had factions that Langley wanted to win. That was Julani. Apparently, the Turks helped with the CIA faction, and here they are now. Nobody knows more about this guy than the Americans. I mean, there was a bounty on his head, a $10 million bounty. You know, I mean, that's crazy money, man. I mean, that's a bounty that's up there with like the Bin Laden reward, you know? So like for years, this guy was an avowed, admitted terrorist who ran ISIL. You know, who is affiliated with Al-Qaeda. Like, this is not me being mean. It's like when we talk about the Ukrainians being led by Nazis. You know, I'm not saying these things for effect. These are the things that the FBI said about this guy. Now, we all know the FBI does, upon occasion, lie on people. So take that with a grain of salt. But, you know, and then when he's talking about, you know, I mean, to lead, you know everything about him because y'all installed this guy. You know, there's no talk about when we're going to get elections, you know, and he's already being given the language of president as opposed to dictator, you know. So when Traore does it, it's a fucking coup. You know, it's a junta. But when this head chopper in chief, okay, decides, you know, to get a fucking shave and a haircut. Right.
It's not like he's built up, you know, a following of, you know, Syrians from across the region. It's not like he's entrenched himself in that community. They popped up with a bunch of trained ISIL fighters and with the Kurds, right? I mean, essentially.
Yeah, and I think so there's two things about that. Over the last week, the PKK has decided to disband, right? Because they're going to be absorbed into this new, that's essentially what Erdogan said. Get the fuck out of Turkey, go to Syria. That's your new homeland. That's as close to a Kurdistan as you're ever going to get. Work with my man, Giuliani, right? And that's happening. The other thing to think about is as it relates to Giuliani, this guy is all of those people that were saying free Syria. This guy is literally deporting the Palestinian resistance. It's while he overlooks, Israel encroaching further and further into their country to the point whereas the Israelis have hit the presidential palace, with missiles within the last month and not a word said, but you're doing everything you can. You're talking about normalizing with Israel. Again, that's how he is a studio plant. He's a industry plant, if you were. And you can do anything. And if you are validated by the West, all of your bad goes away. This is literally the Saddam Hussein story all over again. I wonder how it'll turn out. It always works out well for those guys. And that's what Zelensky knows.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, what's happening here, like what's that larger at because, okay, so you have Giuliani here, right? Okay, so obviously that's a part of this sort of new Middle East, that the West wants to see. This is how the Abraham Accords came to be. This is the new Middle East that the West wants to see. Who else is there? Right there with Giuliani. When you ask, this guy knows, he maybe not know how to chop a body up, but he does know how to order a body to be chopped up, and that's Mohammed bin Salman, okay? He's standing right there next to Giuliani.
Yeah.
And you can add the Saudis in here. What about the Qataris in here? Because they just did a deal.
So that's the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
The Qataris, UAE, and Saudi Arabia, have all essentially committed to almost $400 billion worth of consumption of American products, presumably overwhelmingly military projects, right? And it begins to give you this theory that, or at least the look that the Saudis are choosing, they flirted with de-dollarization, they moved enough assets out there to kind of cover their ass a little bit, but they're getting in bed with the Americans. The Americans are promising them nuclear technology, which was also offered by several others. The Chinese offered them the same technology. The Iranians offered to do joint nuclear enrichment together, which again is a fail-safe. Like the Saudis aren't going to let you build a nuclear missile. You're not going to let the Saudis build a nuclear missile. That's a verification process that we could have counted on right off the rip. Okay. But when you're looking at these photos and MBS is smiling, it's because they know, right? That $400 billion investment into the United States has now become why sanctions are magically going to be released over Syria, because he wants them to start fresh. Why was the Americans sanctioning Syria anyway? What danger was Syria ever? Did they ever pose to the Americans? And their 4,000 year history, plus 4,000 plus, because you forget that Syria is one of those ancient civilizations, the same way Egypt is, the same way Iran is, the same way China is. These are just ancient civilizations. And in all of their years of existence, most of which the United States did not exist, even in the years where there shared some overlap, Syria has never been any type of geopolitical threat to the United States. So why was there sanctions?
Yeah, I think you said it. At the end of the day, we're supposed to be looking at Assad as this horrible dictator that was terrible for the people. And you have to kind of ask yourself, is it going to be better for the people of Syria if that's what even it's going to be called, in the future? And I think, again, I don't know why Americans just love to see countries destabilized. This leader was bad or whatever it may be. And you see Syria in a tougher position now, completely dictated by the West and this sort of, like you said, the new Middle East. I want to talk about Israel as well, because
let me just say this last thing about Syria and we can pivot.
No, keep going.
Well, I think the one thing about Syria that stands out the most as it relates to Russia and the Ukraine conflict, this was an example, once again, of American and Western duplicity as far as having a frozen conflict, right? Which is what they continue to try to pitch to Moscow and to Putin proper. You know, right now in Turkey, we have this charade of a peace process that's happening where Ukraine sends people that are not capable of getting in the weeds and looking at technical spec work, under the auspices of, well, the Russians don't take us serious because Putin himself didn't come. Bruh, like Abraham Lincoln didn't sign the fucking peace treaty with the Confederacy. That's what the generals do. Presidents, as a rule, don't involve themselves in this kind of shit. You know what I'm saying? But once again, it shows the danger of trusting the West because Syria, which was a client state of the Russians, right, trusted the West and said, oh, we're going to have this little freeze. And the moment that the Americans and the West and Israel figured that they had the tactical advantage, they exploited it and overthrew the entire government, and it came down just like that. And everyone's like, how did it happen so fast? And it's like, it didn't happen fast. It happened over 10 years. Like the Americans were slowly funding their enemies, their allies in the region, at least their proxies. How about that? Yeah. And so, it's just one more warning to the Russians as to why not to trust any type of ceasefire initiated or authored by the West.
Yeah. And I'm what I was saying, essentially is that, the HTS, or I don't know if they've gone through a rebrand or whatever the situation is, but
they're a political party now.
But Hamas isn't, though, even though Hamas did win an election. But they're a terrorist organization. But somehow al-Shara, excuse me.
Canceled.
Yeah, and that's probably true. So you have all these mental gymnastics going on because HTS is not in disalignment or misalignment with Israel. They seem to be right in lockstep. There's no issues going on. You do you, I do me kind of feeling here. And that's not what we're seeing from the Houthis, so much so that it was, the Trump administration kind of backing down a little bit. Like, look, we don't need to be going, we don't need to be, kind of attacking the Houthis in this way because we're losing and we're losing F-18s just flying off the boats.
So funny story. Ask me why I'm smiling.
Why are you smiling?
Scuttlebutt is more than F-18s were on the table for danger, right? So we already know this country has shot down more MQ-9 Reapers than probably any other country on Earth, right? They were averaging 2 a week. We've lost 2 to 3 F-18s, depending on who you talk to. But the rumor is what immediately caused the ceasefire talks from Trump was an F-35 was locked on by the Yemenis, right? They fired, and the missile came close enough to the F-35 that it had to do emergency evasive maneuvers. Flares were fired, right? And the humiliation the West would have faced if the F-35, the ultimate stealth fighter, the multi-role air dominance super beast that cost, I don't know, they claim they're $200 million, but they're a little bit closer to like $2 billion a pop. If the Houthis, if the Ansar Allah movement had shot down one of them, you're talking about a whole nother level of danger as far as, once again, we've seen that exposed. If the F-35 is exposed, now we're in a whole nother world of how scary are the Americans? Even the Ansar Allah movement can shoot their F-35s out of the sky. Less than 24 hours after that engagement, we have a ceasefire.
Yeah. And, again, I think all this conversation surrounding the Middle East is all going back. Obviously, it's not just a single issue, but it's all coming back to Palestine. And I don't know if there's some sort of misdirection going on with Trump and Netanyahu or, sort of what's going on. So this was I think this was at the UN. I'm not exactly sure, but this is Trump again. See if I can add this. here's him, after he met with HTS, he's still kind of going through this same Biden, kind of Biden conversation of like rapes and these things and all
Happen as long as
there we go. I'm just going to play this real quick and here we go.
guys, as leaders, take the indignity of ensure of safety and dignity of the Palestinian people, but that cannot happen as long as guys, as leaders, take delight in raping, torturing, and murdering innocent people. Can't have it. I greatly appreciate issue of safety.
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially, this was what we were talking about with, Trump and I'm sorry, not Trump, Biden, Freudian slip, Biden, and these ridiculous claims. Oh, well, he's senile and they're telling him these stories. And well, here we are, man. We're going to be approaching 2 years of G-Side coming up very soon. Okay. It's going to be quicker than we think. And it doesn't look like this conflict is going to stop at all. And what were the conversations that we've been hearing at that time? Hamas was sexually assaulting, raping everyone, children, cutting people's heads off. No substantiated evidence anywhere of any kind. And many people who claimed that they were raped have gone back and denied it. We talked about the guy who was like, oh, I saw 20 people had been raped, and I just covered it up. Like there's now Trump is kind of going back into these same narratives. And everything that happens, like anything that a natural disaster happens, it's Hamas. If you mess up your falafel dish, well, Hamas is the one that did it. And no matter what happens, 100 Palestinians were killed just yesterday. Everything is now still Hamas. It's still this. It's still these same tired narratives. Do you think people are seeing through it? Like, what is just kind of your opinion on this?
Absolutely. I mean, more than ever, people are starting to see through it, right? When you have celebrities like Kehlani, calling out other celebrities for acting like they don't see what's going on, So a couple of thoughts come to my mind. One, the United Nations themselves have verified that the Israelis are raping Palestinian detainees, okay? Which you could also call hostages if you wanted to. And there are thousands of them, not hundreds of them. There might be tens of thousands. There probably are tens of thousands of them. That's documented. It's from the United Nations, and this is not like allegation, right? You've actually had IDF soldiers come on TV and say, I don't feel like I have to be ashamed about raping these Palestinian detainees. So that has happened. The second thought that I would say is I don't know if Biden or Trump specifically are the men to be leading the face of, we have to stop these rapists. I just don't know if those two particular men are the best face for
incredible
this.
Amounts of allegations.
Some of them have convictions. Biden has allegations, but Tara Reid still exists, had to flee to Russia and writes about her experiences all the time. If you have questions, I encourage you all to look into them. You can believe them or not believe them. I'm not here to tell you to believe, because believing is the province of religion.
I'm just saying they're compelling.
They are compelling stories.
And historically, you can see that.
And Trump has lost a court case. So, I mean,
So,
these are the same guys that, Trump just had Conor fucking McGregor at the White House. Stop. It's so ridiculous. But again, it plays into the white supremacist narrative of, black and brown men can't be controlled. They're around the beautiful Israeli women and oh my God. Meanwhile, you have the Israeli hostage, I can't remember her name, who was freed. And she said she felt safer, being occupied by Hamas. She has been date raped since she's been released back into Israeli culture, because of course she's going to be fetishized. Like, oh, you were with those savages for almost a year. What have they done to you? You know, with this fascination, dread fascination to the point where it's just like, we have to bring her back to the Israeli side, right? She's already reported about being sexually assaulted by Israelis since she's been returned. So again, you're talking about a culture that has some very dubious qualities as it relates to this particular human rights violation. And I really think that it's a bit of the pot calling the kettle black. We have evidence that's documented by the United Nations as it relates to the Israelis and their approach to war in Palestine. We have allegations as it relates to brown men in Palestine with very little evidence.
Yeah, I mean, weren't we just talking about the own internal affairs of Israel having trials based on whether this is allowed or not?
Yeah, and the soldiers came out and said that we don't feel like we should have to be ashamed.
Yeah.
We rape these people to protect Israel. Look, for the liberals watching my show being triggered and shit, I'm so sorry, but this is geopolitics. And like, we have to talk about the issues without gloves. We have to be honest about these things that are happening, right? And if you're a feminist, this should be why you are vehemently against war, because this is where rape happens on an industrial scale. War.
Yeah. And Palestinians are being raped to death. I mean, there's already cases in there. And we've already seen that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Men, women, non-binary people, all the people that are in the IDF are rapists, it's a rite of passage.
Or they know them and they don't turn them in. So sorry, Gal Gadot. I don't see you as some feminist icon.
But I still think that there's a high likelihood that a part of some sort of, ritual or behavior, or just like the general mindset of, an Israeli, in terms of, sexual consent and the things that surround that. Their culture is against that. They have a large population of people who are pedophiles, escaped rapists, alleged human traffickers. I'm not just pulling this out of nowhere. Please feel free to do your own research on people who flee there and what their backgrounds are. If you look up, the sex offender list through Israel, I mean, it's so many dots, extensive. You can't even see the map.
It's quite extensive.
Yeah, and ask why this country is, so welcoming to those types of people. And again, we're 18 months into this, a year and a half of a G-side, and nothing really has changed. You had a brief 60-day ceasefire that was in quotations for sure.
Right.
And now there's no food, there's no supplies getting into Gaza. And, also this war with Iran on the way. And
I would say the only real thing that's changed is the tensions that are manifesting inside, just like we talk about the primary contradictions of American society and Western society. Israel, Eurovision acceptable Israel has primary contradictions that they cannot account for. For example, the whole mythology is we all have to fight or else Israel will fall, right? Men and women are forced into the military, right? Which is super ironic when Israel says things like there are no civilians in Gaza. Of the two countries, only one of which has forced military conscription that goes beyond gender. However, there are certain people that don't have to serve, like, for example, the ultra-Orthodox. And you have rabbis that are saying, if the Haredi draft dodgers are arrested, the ultra-Orthodox will leave Israel. Like, this is a primary contradiction because on the one hand, they want to conquer the entire Levant, the Greater Israel Project. On the other hand, their population is not high enough to have like a protected minority that never has to serve, especially when everyone has to serve. And when they're threatened with serving, all of that, well, if we leave Israel, where are we going to go? Immediately turns into, if you draft me, I'm going back to Poland.
Yeah, because you can escape. You can escape when it's not your country.
You don't have to be here.
You don't have to stand, you know what I mean? And it goes back to this is why the Israelis don't mind poisoning wells and destroying the ecosystem surrounding it because it's not their land. They can't, they have the highest rate of skin cancer because they literally can't, their bodies are not adjusted to the climate. And it just all the silly conversations surrounding us. We don't have to go into it. I think our listeners are very aware, and it just goes to the point of like Palestine is such an obvious, it's just an obvious side. They always say this thing like be on the right side of history and all those silly things. But like it really is just one of the most obvious, most large human rights violations in recorded history. And that sucks. And it's really, it's tearing at the fabric of the global society. Yeah.
One thing that we're learning from this entire exchange, though, right? We're watching in many ways the Middle East from a geopolitical point of view subsume, right, and eclipse the importance geopolitically of Europe. Think about everything that's happening right now, right? You had the initial meetings of the Russians and the Americans in Saudi Arabia with MBS essentially being the mediator between these things. That happened not in Rome, it happened in Saudi Arabia. You know what I'm saying? You have the whole debates that are happening, the discussions that are happening between the Iranians and the Americans. That's happening in Oman. That's not happening in Paris, France. The boxing world is pretty much focused on Saudi Arabia. All of the world's best boxing fights are thrown by them, right? And in many ways, you're watching an ascendant Middle East, that is flush with money, competent militaries, with cutting edge weapons, to the point one of the other things that Trump said, is he was complaining about why do the American drones cost so much? Why can't we make cheap, great drones like the Iranians? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's some guy at Boeing right now that's just stabbing his head with a pencil. Like, the profit margin is not right. We're not going to make those cheap little drones. You know what I'm saying? They want to sell $38 million MQ-9s. They don't want to sell $5,000, FPV drones or Garand drones. They just don't want to make loitering munitions that are disposable and inexpensive, even though that is the state of contemporary war right now. So once again, you have the Middle East serving as a lens, and they're in ascendancy. The only thing that can really threaten that is war. And I think that's why, even in spite of the history of duplicity that Americans and the West have had as it relates to countries like Iran or even Syria or even, Gaza or the Ansar Allah movement, people still sit down and talk because they want to do everything possible to have to not jeopardize the ascendancy, right? If Saudi Arabia is about to have a golden era, Iran coming into the BRICS, they're about to have their nuclear reactors online. They have great relationships with the Chinese, who are doing all kinds of breakthroughs as far as fusion goes. Their military cooperation with the Russians, like, even though they're sanctioned and it's difficult to get their oil to market or other Iranian products, their inclusion into the BRICS offers a financial framework that hasn't really been available to them since the Islamic Revolution. And bright times are around the future if they can smooth out some sanctions, get a little bit of sanction relief, convince the Americans, as they've said all along, we don't have an interest in having nuclear weapons, right? The thing is, Americans are so uneducated in these terms. I'm just going to say this about Iran and be done, that they conflate all issues, right? Every nation on the planet has the right to do nuclear uranium extraction. Everybody does. That's not like a special thing. Like, we just talked about the Mayday on the last episode. That's 80 years ago. That's how long the world has had nuclear technology. So then imagine when a Western country comes to you and says, well, you don't have the right to develop this technology that's 80 years old, that you, by the way, have, and your Western satellite countries seem to have. You know what I'm saying? And it's not just that, right? The Americans, to the point, whereas they want Iran to give up all nuclear enrichment, which, again, they have a right to do, but also give up their missile program, right? All while demanding nothing of Israel, which is the reason why these countries feel like they have to arm themselves. And we're not in the 90s anymore where we can just dictate terms. We have to have communications with these seemingly insignificant nations, even though they're not great powers, they are regional powers. And they have the ability to inflict harm on the American consumer. You know, if not the American citizen by way of like, oh, do I have to worry? Are we going to be FPV droned? Nah, but they can significantly damage the American economy, just like the Americans have damaged their economy. They're in an ability, they have an ability right now to inflict a punch that goes beyond their weight class. They don't have to win the fight. They just have to wound the lion enough to make the lion leave them the fuck alone and go find easier prey.
Yeah, I think the JCPOA was already a great leap for the Iranian people and the Iranian government. And they really tried to go into it with, I think like an honest try. They gave it an honest go. They gave it a shot. But unfortunately, it's not how the United States works, not how it works with Syria, not how it works with Ukraine. It's not how it's going to work with Taiwan. The list goes on and on and on and on and on. It's just not a good partner. And, when Trump pulled out, it was just a political, again, just another political move for him to, look a particular way, or tough on. I don't even know what we're being tough on, at this
enemies
point.
of Israel. We're tough on the enemies of Israel.
And the whole peace through strength thing. And
which is a literal line from 1984, guys. It's a huge part of the book, man. Please, guys, stop saying peace through strength. It's a literal fascist slogan.
Yeah. I mean, they don't, I don't know. I mean, I guess it always shocks me how people who are in politics or, claim to watch the news are not like losing their minds with some of this stuff. And I think it's important to acknowledge now is we're now 18 months into a G-side, the war, on and off war with Yemen, and that's what it was. Escalation in Iran and no peace in Ukraine. I don't want to hear anything about Trump not being a war president. He's a war president. He's furthering and entrenching and deepening these conflicts, and nothing of any real consequence is happening if you're one of those people on the ground. Anyway, I think we know that, and I think all of our listeners know that. I want to give a shout out to our podcast listeners. And we're available everywhere you find podcasts: Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts. You can always check us out on our Podbean site, innercityleft.com as well. If you, want to know more about what we got going on, Fables, Foibles, and Other American Sins, right here, available for purchase. I want to give a shout out to all of our patrons. I appreciate you guys. We have a budding community in our Patreon. We have free subscriptions as well. Slide on in, say hello if you want. Like, subscribe, comment. I appreciate some of the comments we've been getting, like shout out to y'all, even if you just send like some fire emojis or whatever. That engagement helps.
Doing what you can for the algorithm. We see y'all, man. Thank y'all so much. Because you know the system don't want us to win. Only through community can we win, and y'all are our community. We do this shit for y'all. Yeah,
and I think we're deeply passionate about the work that we do, and it's not just analysis for us. It's our lives, it's who we are as people. Anyway, so all the good things. Tanky, what did we miss? Other thoughts, feelings?
Solid news, just fit to spit.
I guess that's a slogan. For Mojo Tanky Summer, I'm Amin TMK. This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Left.